The weekly Industry Angel podcast hears from business leaders and entrepreneurs who share their stories and that all-important light bulb moment. This can inspire us all and maybe scratch that itch and kickstart that idea that keeps you awake at night. Welcome to episode 11 of the Industry Angel. We've had stacks of contact following episode 10 with our Taz Thornton. Phil Brewis thought Taz was excellent and very listenable. Yes, that's a word, Phil. Cheers. Julie Skevington got in touch on the LinkedIn group and enjoyed Taz. Best of luck, Julie, with your new venture. Elaine Rogers enjoys listening on a weekend from southwest rural France when her internet connection allows. Send me a picture, Elaine. It sounds lovely. Actually, feel free to send me some listeners' views and I'll feature them on the website. Nicola said that Taz is her favourite guest so far and has got a mother Lynn now subscribing. Thanks for listening, you two. Thanks, Donna Loudon, for your kind words. TV's not for me, Donna. I've got a bit of a face for radio. Good luck to David and all running in the Manchester Marathon this weekend. Stay safe, keep hydrated. You've all worked very hard, so enjoy your day. A big hello to all our listeners further afield. Drop me a line, say hi. We've got lots of downloads from the US as well. I can see places here such as Oregon, Colorado, Virginia. So get in touch, drop me a line. I'd love to hear from you. Right, as my dad would say, let's get this show on the road. This week we have with us the empowerment coach Pip Thomas. Pip is an entrepreneur, trainer and speaker. Welcome to Industry Angel, Pip.
Hi Ian, how are you doing?
I'm really good and thanks for your time, Pip. I'm excited to speak to you. Now, Pip, why don't I start by giving our listeners a heads up on you?
Okay.
I've got an intro from your website. Would you mind if I went ahead with that?
Go for it. I might learn something.
Good stuff. Pip is an entrepreneur, having set up and sold several award-winning businesses in both the technology and learning and development sectors. This follows an extensive career in the corporate world in sales, senior management and HR, in the retail and tech sectors. Is that about right, Pip?
That's about it in a nutshell, most definitely.
Super. Well, last week we heard from Taz Thornton, Pip, and amongst our discussions was sort of leaving the corporate world and pursuing your goals. And when I read that little paragraph, I thought, before we begin your topic, why don't we follow that on? And why didn't you let us know about your past roles and kind of what the catalyst was to go and found your own startups maybe? Is that okay?
Yeah, of course it is. Of course it is. So up until roughly 2003, I'd always worked in the corporate arena. So worked for organisations of 50,000 plus employees and loved it. I loved the challenge. I loved dealing with, someone else's budget in many ways, but really being tasked with result-driven projects and being part of a very large team. I probably wasn't that aware at the time, though, Ian, that I was just, in many ways, just a number. And although I did a job and a really effective job, actually I was doing it invariably always for someone else. And in 2004, at the time, I was working for a large telecoms company, as you'll see on my website, and I had the opportunity to go and do some personal development, and I decided I would take a entry-level course in NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming, which I'm sure you're familiar with.
Sure.
And came back from that completely fired up, as you could imagine, working how I could think about how I could use it within the corporate arena, within sales, with internal communication and marketing, PR. And I was having this whole conversation with my direct line managers at the time, or directors at the time, and became acutely aware that they weren't necessarily as bought into my enthusiasm as I was. And like lots of large corporate organisations, just before Christmas, they were about to do a large reshuffle. And as a result of which they were going to make a number of people redundant. And I was in that opportunity, which was an incredible place to be. So initially, Ian, the deal was that I had to make my team redundant, but I was actually okay. They had another role for me, but it wasn't the role I'd done already. So I could stay within the corporate arena, something I was very familiar with, worked in the corporate arena for the best part of probably about 16, 17 years by then. And it felt very familiar and very comfortable. Or I could do exactly what I did, which was take it as an opportunity to really pursue my dreams and run my own business. So I went back following week, literally, and said, you know what, thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for the opportunity to now go and follow my dreams, which was to set up my first company.
It's funny there, Pip, you mentioned the opportunity of, well, it's actually redundancy. And I guess that gives you the runway going forward to start your own business. That gives you the cash to pay the bills. And it's becoming a bit of a recurring theme now when we talk to guests about how did they start. Because there's that cash void there if you just quit. But you had that runway, yeah? Is that what got you there?
Yeah, definitely. And I look back on it, Ian, and I think it was a number of things that fell into place for me. I mentioned the fact that I just completed my NLP practitioner course, which, as you know, is, I now run one of the businesses I run is an NLP training company. And I'm sure, absolutely sure that having the timing of having completed that course really enabled me to feel very comfortable with saying, do you know what, I'll take redundancy. I'll move away from the security of a role where I know what I'm going to get paid regularly. And I will absolutely throw myself into setting up my own company. And yes, it was also made much, much easier. It's a far more comfortable position to be in when someone says, and here's a lump sum of money to go and do it with. But I think sometimes, I work with a lot of people who've been in similar situations, and you can see where they're toing and throwing between grasping that opportunity as something they really want to do and still having an element of fear that sits behind it, because they're used to their world as it was within the corporate arena or within the employed arena, which provided them with safety and security.
For sure, yeah. And I'll go back to Taz again last week, and it was all about trust that Taz mentioned, just trust in yourself and go for it, really.
Yeah.
You mentioned something there that I wrote down. It makes me laugh, and you talked about managing someone else's budget.
Yeah, it's always nice to get your own.
But now you went from that, and you went to managing your own. Yeah.
Yes, totally. With that comes all sorts of things. You become slightly more aware potentially. But it's the same thing, isn't it? Because at the end of the day, the end results within any business that I run with other people, or whether I'm running it purely on my own, are actually driven by me. And the only person who potentially benefits or doesn't benefit initially will be me within that arena, whether it's by being able to employ more people, develop more people around me, or whether it's by developing my own lifestyle, whatever it might be. So you become very much more aware of the things that matter. And the question I always used to say to people when I was in the corporate arena, and actually when I came out and set up my first business, Invest, the guys that work within that business, I'd often say to them, so when you're agreeing to go and, I don't know, book hotels, the venues, whatever it might be, just ask yourself, if this is your money, how would you spend it? Because they had done that transition from corporate, where it was someone else's budget and you really didn't have to worry as much, to being in an arena where you have to be more considerate of what you're doing and how you're doing it.
Yeah, and did you find that in the past that wasn't such an issue? I mean, I've always worked in the private sector, and to be honest, that always has been an issue. But I think you've worked for some quite large organisations, and did you feel the larger it is, the more that gets lost?
Most definitely. I was blown when I moved across to the telecoms company. So I'd worked for the John Lewis Partnership for many years, and I moved across to T-Mobile at the time, just when the whole telecoms market was going crazy. And I remember sitting there and looking at, I had this big team of people, fabulous, had all this stuff to do, and then all my budget documents arrived, and I sat and looked at them and thought, no, there's an error here. There's got to be an error here. How on earth am I going to spend all that money?
Really?
Yeah. What sort of internet shopping sites can I go to? But I jest. But it's a very different world. It's a very different world.
So you mentioned NLP, and I'll just touch upon that in a moment, because I feel just by talking to you now that that's been a massive change in your life.
Yeah, huge.
Do you want to give us a few minutes on that? And you mentioned there you've got a training organisation. Is that purely looking at NLP? Pip?
Yes, it is. So I run a couple of businesses, and the one to do with NLP is called Edge NLP Limited. So I set that up in 2009. But my intro to Neuralink programming, as I said, was back in 2003, 2004. We have a massive resource pool available to us. It sits firmly on top of our shoulders, and invariably we're capable of achieving really whatever we want to. We set our mind to it, but often what gets in the way is the internal dialogue that we have and we play continuously about whether we're capable of doing things, whether it's right for us, whether it happens to other people and not to us. And for me, having started my NLP journey, and on the back of it, having set up my first business that was, an award-winning, successful business, which had its peaks and had some fairly massive troughs at times as well, I absolutely know it was down to me recognising that it was up to me to be able to deal with these things, and I could choose my attitude, I could choose my way forward in order to facilitate a different change, a different outcome. So NLP has been a fundamental part of my life since then. I've made many changes in my life, both personally and professionally, as I've gone through that journey, that all enable me to be, I believe, the most authentic version of who I am.
Pip, if I can just talk about that, I think what you alluded to there was something like the imposter syndrome.
Yes.
Where you don't think you can do it, and why are you, and is the rug going to get pulled? You as a speaker now, do you feel super confident, or do you still get a little bit of, I guess it's human nature before you step on that stage or you speak to a large group. Do you still get that imposter syndrome now, or have you totally nailed that with the NLP?
A bit of both. I think an element of it doesn't do you any harm.
Yeah.
I think if you're going to rock up on stage, or whether you're presenting, speaking, working with a group of people, and you absolutely think you know all the answers, then my question would be, how flexible are you being with your message? Every audience is going to be different, and therefore their requirements are going to be very, very different. And for me, it's about flexing whatever you're talking about, whatever the message is you're looking to share, flexing it to the needs of the audience and the individuals, so they, each of them individually and collectively, get from it what they really need. So the message is for them, it's not about me. So if there's an element of feeling, not necessarily an imposter, but an element of feeling, what would the word be? Slightly nervous, potentially. Then I think that's a good thing for me. I know my subject, and obviously, but it's very much about having the ability to adapt that to the audience and any random questions they might choose to throw at you.
Sure, yeah. Tell me about it.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So, but that level of adrenaline kind of does get you through, and as you say, if you know your subject, you'll be fine.
Totally.
Yeah. In terms of knowing your subject, we've spoke about a few things that you often speak about, and we mentioned about the power of generosity. And I think this will be a good lead in, especially after a few guests in the past we've had. And I'm dead interested to know how you go about this. So come on, over to you.
Okay, so I was thinking about this the other day. So I've just started writing a book, which is going to be called The Giving Effect, which is all about the power of generosity, and how whatever you put out there will come back in bucket loads if you choose, depending on how you put it out there. And I remember having a conversation some time back with a guy I did some training, and I was talking to him about a situation I'd had when I'd felt quite let down by someone. And we were talking all about expectations the expectation that sat around that. One of the things that came to my mind through that conversation is, what is your motivation for giving? And when I say giving, I'm talking about giving energetically, giving your time, maybe giving an element of your product or services that you offer, whatever it might be, and it can be across all of those spectrums. It's about recognizing what your motivation is. And if you're giving with the intention you want that person to give back, then you might well find yourself in a position of being disappointed, because it's also about understanding how you anticipate someone might give back. So for me, it's about sharing my time, sharing my energy with individuals, knowing that somewhere out there in the ether, by virtue of how that message might have helped, nurtured, developed, whatever it might be, that particular person in that set of circumstances. It's a little bit like the 6 degrees of separation. Somewhere that comes back to you, and it can come back to you in an energetic fashion, or it can come back to you with someone literally, coming back to you with a genuine piece of work or a recommendation, what it might be. So if I can give you an example, Ian, is that okay?
Certainly, and I'm starting to think about philanthropy and all sorts going through my mind. But are you just talking about, you mentioned there about giving to people. You're not expecting that right person to give back to you, but it could be anybody coming from anywhere.
Yeah, totally. So a really good example that was actually brought into, someone reminded me of it the other day. So I frequently travel into London, and I love my time on the train because I absolutely love watching what's going on around me, picking up some of the thoughts and feelings and the kind of relationships and dynamics that are happening around me. And I got on the train a few months back, and this young lad was sitting next to me, and he was looking very dapper, all suited and booted. And he was just finishing off a phone call on his mobile to, I believe, his mum. And it was all to do with the fact he was going for an interview with a merchant bank. And as he hung up the phone, he kind of turned and looked at me and initially apologised for having been on the phone sitting next to me. And I said, no, it's okay. It's all good. So tell me a little bit about the interview you're going for. And he was like, oh, he was really interested. He was really quite grateful that I was interested. And he sat and he talked about it, and he talked about how nervous he was feeling and some of the other bits and pieces. And we just generally had a conversation where I was kind of just feeding back some of the things that he was saying to me. And at the very end, when we pulled up in Euston, he simply said to me, thank you so much. I feel in a really good place to go for this interview. What can I do for you? And I said, just do me a favour and text me. If I give you my number, just text me and let me know how you got on. So I then posted this on my Facebook as one of my normal what happened in the carriage today. What was really fascinating for me, Ian, was the amount of people via social media who contacted me to find out if I'd heard yet how the interview went.
Well, I'm stunned to silence here because that is so nice, and I'm sure when this goes live and the listeners are driving or running, they'll be totally loving that.
And the guy texted me. He did really well in his first interview. He went back for his second interview, and I then fed that back. And the really interesting thing for me was I was talking to a good friend the other day. He said that they had a whole conversation. She had a whole conversation that evening with her husband and her family around it, which then led into them having a number of conversations about interviewing skills, about confidence, about belief, and the rest. And it just snowballed. So what did I get back from that? I got back a whole load of really fabulous positive energy from people that I know, and the fact that the knock-on effect from that fabulous young man on the train was that a whole host of other people all around benefited by him going to that interview.
For sure. And this is getting more popular. You mentioned social media there, and you do see a lot of these videos. Sometimes I'm a little bit skeptical, why the video on it, but anyway, they do. But I think generosity, it's just an act of humanization, and it is getting more popular. It's good to see. But I guess on the flip side, self-interest is necessary for survival. And I think, but it's coming back around. Do you feel that? Do you think more people are doing this generosity feeling, or?
Yeah, I feel.
You're on a train, for instance, Pip, sorry to jump in, but you're on a train. Do you see more people now interacting, whereas before it might have been quieter and heads down? Or?
I'd love to say yes. Actually, I would say no. I think what I see is those people who are interacting at a much deeper level. I think with the power of social media and the power of the digital age that we're in, it often means that people are transfixed by their phones, their tablets, whatever it might be, because that's our first and foremost way of communicating, seemingly now. So when you do see conversations taking place and interactions taking place, it's coming from a different place within that individual, I feel. So there's a real depth of generosity, a real depth of genuinely wanting to know. Maybe it's about helping someone, whatever it might be. So I think the depth of the connection is greater. I don't think it's necessarily that there are more people doing it. I think the quality of it is improved.
Yeah, I totally agree. And just as you were talking about that, I was nodding away, thinking, yeah, you're right. So you're writing this book, Pip. How is that structured? I mean, you've just given us a great example there. What else is in the contents?
Really good question, Ian. If you want to offer up some ideas, I'll write it down. Well, it's early days for me. It's the first book I've written. So at the moment, I'm kind of offloading all the different variations of where you can see generosity taking place. So, whether it's in an interaction such as the example I've given, whether it was within a business environment, whether it's within a relationship, And what I want to do is create some frames around those, so that anyone who comes to that book and reads that book actually will find something that resonates with them. And they can see also how, I've given one example, but generosity transcends across every aspect of our life. And the benefit that you get, not just the individual, but the benefit you get from an energetic and an emotional perspective, when you know, purely by doing something easily within your power that has cost you nothing, you've enabled someone else to achieve something, is very beneficial. And if you can create a model around that and map it across the different areas of your world, then anyone reading the book will be able to go, yep, I get that. I see where that sits in my life. And actually, potentially, I'm doing it already.
Do you feel, Pip, that you can have generosity in the business world, though?
Most definitely.
I'm just trying to think of a few examples of that. I mean, in the past, I've worked for some very generous people, but sometimes, and I won't mention names, obviously, but sometimes the money got to them.
Yeah. There's no truer phrase, is there, than be kind to the people on the way up, because you never know when you might meet them again on the way down.
For sure.
And I quite like that phrase. So some of the examples where I've seen generosity work in business. So if I think about my NLP business, for instance, there's been occasions where the generosity element of it actually has been a monetary generosity, from a perspective of enabling someone to start their NLP journey, absolutely knowing that all they need is that opportunity to get going, and their worlds will absolutely skyrocket in order for them to be able to be in the position they need to be, earning the sort of income, having the lifestyle they want. And through that, whilst their friends and family and colleagues see them grow, actually those people want to understand the journey they've gone on, and therefore drawn towards NLP. So it comes back to me in a different way. Does that make sense?
It does. I was just thinking there of a director of a company, for instance. If that director is super generous, are they looked upon as being a bit soft, or?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because this is a conversation I potentially had with myself fairly recently around. And that's about expectation. So at the very beginning of this conversation, Ian, I talked about generosity, and I talked about it being aligned to expectation. So at the end of for me, a director in a business, is it about being soft, or is it about actually considering the most important commodity you have within your organisation, which are the people that work there? I think it's the latter. I always have to keep in mind that I am running a business, and therefore there's a commercial interest somewhere, and it will come back one way or the other. It's also, I think, about framing whatever you might be doing with the individual in a manner by which they appreciate that you're not being completely soft.
Yeah, you're right. I think it is the individual. I mean, for me, I am too soft. I'm very much a people person. But when it comes to leadership, I can do it, but I don't want to rule with an iron fist,
Absolutely. That's about buying hearts. That's winning hearts and minds.
Indeed it is. And I guess it's another skill of changing the way and you motivate certain individuals are all different, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that one of the biggest transitions for me coming out of the corporate arena and moving into running my own businesses, which are smaller business and the like, has been the different set of skills that potentially you call upon when you're working with a team of people. The turn, if I think about some of the companies I worked for in the corporate arena, the turnover of staff was huge. If people weren't hitting their targets, they were out. And there was that expectation, and all that happened would be that they would then move on to another business and do it all over again. And so the wheel continued. It's a very different environment, I feel. And I think one of the greatest learnings for me, or one of the things I'm most thankful of through running my own businesses, is the fact that I am I'd like to believe I'm far more considerate, and I work on my intuition a hell of a lot more, and I'm definitely much more caring around the individuals who are within the business, whether it's my people working within the business or clients, suppliers, whoever it might be, because I absolutely value the relationships that I have there, way more than I did when I was in the corporate arena.
I totally agree, and you've got to. In an SME, I don't think you can rule with an iron fist.
No.
If you lose somebody and you're a 30-strong organisation, 20 it's going to hit.
Yes, absolutely.
But when you're in the corporate world, I guess, like you say, there's a bit of a churn there, and it just happens.
Totally.
But I guess this conversation then leads to sort of culture. What is the culture like within an organisation? It's a really important thing for me.
Massively, and that's about being authentic, also. So working in an organisation where you can be the most authentic version of you, and where the values of that organisation fit with your values, and there's that whole mutual respect that sits there. And I think that's incredibly important.
It is, and just being able to be you is very important, because sometimes in a role you can't be you have to be somebody else to kind of fit in with the people around you.
Totally, and you within that, Ian, if you're coming back to your imposter syndrome, if you're spending a fair amount of your time and your energy focusing on being what you believe other people want you to be, are you going to do your best work?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Wow. Okay. We're off on one here.
Okay, where should we go now? Come on.
Well, listen, we discussed NLP there, and I can really see how that's changed you, to be honest, Pip, even this in this short 30 minutes. What else has influenced you? I'm really interested.
It was okay. So what else have we?
Or who else? Or any books? Or what have you picked up, or who have you spoken to where you thought that's really resonated with me? I'm going to take this on board and look a bit further into that.
So there's a couple of things I'm working with at the moment that have really, as you rightly said, they're resonated with me, and I feel quite strongly about. I'm working with three. I'm working in the role of a mentor with 3 different organisations. And I found that really fascinating. So the first one is the Cherie Blair Foundation, which you're probably familiar with.
Sure.
So I've been mentoring an amazing lady based in Nigeria, and it's all about women in business across the globe, and really helping them to achieve what they need to achieve. And this lady is extraordinary, and she works working within organisations to develop ethics, working ethics, across Nigeria and Kenya, so that there's fair working environments for men and women. And you can imagine it's quite a challenge. And this lady's written a book which is quite phenomenal, and she's just been signed up by some universities to deliver her courses. Now, she's worked for the last 5 years to get to this position in a very, very challenging environment, and has achieved it. I find her quite inspirational, and I'm ever grateful for the opportunity to work within the Cherie Blair Foundation and to have met people such as Sarah. So that's one sort of area. Because you kind of look at your own life, Ian, and there are times when I go, today's a challenge. Really? Everything's contextualised. And yes, it might well be a challenge, but gosh, aren't we resourceful in this country? Far more resourceful than some, or we have the resources where other countries just don't. And yet there are people who are achieving some incredible things.
Pip, if somebody wanted to know about Sarah...
Yeah, contact me. Via my Facebook. It's promoted on all my social media sites as well.
Excellent. Okay, so that was the Cherie Blair Foundation.
One of the others is I'm starting working as a mentor with Aspire, so the Aspire Foundation, and they're working to get 1 billion women by 2020 across the globe, having mentors and supporting them in business. So that's quite a huge number, 1 billion women. And I'm going to be working with a couple of women within their environment, providing business and personal mentoring.
Fantastic. So is Aspire doing this across the world?
Yeah, it's a global project. It's huge.
Yeah, excellent stuff. And do you get matched with a mentor in your hometown, or
no? You can. They send you through the list, so you look at where they're working, what their project is, and also what are the key skills they're looking for out of a mentor. And you just align yourself accordingly. So the person that I'm going to be working with, I think actually is based in France. But they do, it's global. They come across anywhere across the world.
If any of our listeners wanted to get involved in the Aspire Foundation, would they just go online and can they just hook up with a mentor?
Absolutely. Look up the Aspire Foundation, and there's an application process there where you can apply to be a mentor. I would really, really recommend it. They're an amazing organisation. If you think they're looking, the numbers, their target is very clear. 1 billion women by 2020 globally. That's phenomenal.
Excellent. Anything else? We've got Cherie, Blair, we've got Aspire.
Yeah,
Come
and then
on. I know you've got more going on.
I might get bored easily otherwise. The last one that I'm just starting to form a relationship with is something known as the Passion Project, and it's slightly different to the other two. It's an engagement project for youth unemployment. And it's based in the UK, and it works across 3 kind of key areas. It looks at skills, behaviours, and knowledge, and it's a not-for-profit organisation, really designed at enabling young people to develop, as I say, whether it's skills, their behaviours, attitudes, and knowledge in order to get themselves into meaningful employment. And that's fabulous.
Yeah, there's 3 fantastic projects to leave our listeners with there, and I'm sure they could go and look into those. If I put the show notes on, we'll work together and we'll get it up there on the website for people to take a look at.
Most definitely.
Good stuff. Well, just before you go, Pip, is there anything maybe you could read? Have you got any books there that you've been interested in that we could share?
Okay, so if I was going to leave you with 3 books.
3, right? Okay.
That's okay. And 2 of them are in my mind now because I have shared these with a couple of people recently. The one is called The Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod. And it's the 6 habits that will transform your life before 8 a.m. It's a must read. You'll find yourself getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning. The second one, Your Best Year Yet by Jinny Ditzler. And again, it's all about changing your life forever. And then something a little bit more relaxing is called, and you might well have heard of this, it's called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. And it's all about rediscovering your connection with creativity, whether it's drawing, whether it's writing, journaling, whatever it might be. But it's all about reconnecting with your creative self in order to find peace and harmony.
They sound fantastic. And, I do like to ask that question because quite often similar books are popping up. And certainly Miracle Morning, Hal's book, I think Graham Alcott mentioned that from a productivity point of view.
Yes. Yeah, sure.
And it was quite funny, actually. I don't know if you've heard the episode with Graham, but he did I think he was getting up in the middle of the night and working during the night just to try and test productivity, how productive he was during the night rather than during the day. And
fabulous.
Extreme productivity.
Yeah, very much so. Good Lord.
Well, that's excellent. Thanks very much, Pip. Is anything else you want to leave us with? I mean, quite often we get a call to action, and I think you've left us with a brilliant one there when we're talking about altruism. You're talking about there taking a chance on generosity.
Yeah, totally. Just put it out there and see what you get back. You'll be amazed. And the fact you get it back in a very understated fashion, I think, is the best way.
Well, there you go, listeners. There's a test for you. Go out there, be generous, and tell us all about it and see what the impact was.
Absolutely. Go for it.
Brilliant. Well, thanks very much, Pip. I thoroughly enjoyed our time together.
Okay. Thank you, Ian.
Cheers, Pip. Well, I'm at serious risk here of getting out there and hugging some trees. I thought Pip was excellent. It's really true enough, though, the art of generosity is awesome and it's applied by so many. I already know so many of you do this as well. I myself mentor students at my local university. I have pro bono positions on boards. It's so rewarding, and that it exposes you to situations that you would often never get a chance to experience as well. So here's your homework, angels. Pick up the phone, drop a message on LinkedIn, ask a connection if there's anything you can help with, invite someone for a coffee, make the time. You can do something for me too. Jump onto industryangel.com, and on the blog section, there's instructions on how to review. We've got thousands of downloads, and if only a small percentage left to review, iTunes would just shoot us up to the top, and then we can attract some big names. Bill Gates, Hillary Clinton, Tom Cruise. Although on second thoughts, we might leave that one. Okay, so here's your mission. Get out there, get pumped, drop me a line, tell me all about it, and I can share it with the audience. I'm Ian Farrer, this is the Industry Angel, and get out there and give.